And the little I know, he also influenced Michael Harrington, the socialist leader, and they believed that ultimately they believed that the left should operate within the Democratic Party, be the left wing of the Democratic Party, because there's already an electorate, and why reinvent the wheel, etc., etc. And at least in many of Harrington's books, that was the theory. And Albert Shanker was a maverick labor leader. He was arrested innumerable times during these strikes because he actually would violate the Taylor law.
What years are we talking about here?
I'm not certain, 60s.
Okay.
And
60s, I thought teachers were unionized a century ago.
No. They
Really?
had professional associations.
I see.
And that was the whole point. They were divided and conquered as professionals, not workers.
Divide and conquer.
And that is why if you go to the UFT headquarters, they have their slogan is, "We are a union of professionals." That's a vague reference to the split in teachers organizing of 100 years ago. And
split, divide and conquer.
Yeah.
And if we are talking about teachers, educated, very well educated, right?
The United Federations of Teachers sent teachers to go to the Southern Freedom Schools during the voting registration campaigns, and they're people like the late Sandra Feldman, also Shackmanized. They were recruited by Bayard Rustin, who was an ally of Albert Shanker, and they organized the March on Washington, and so they were of inestimable service. And then when he retired, he was a member on the national board of the AFL-CIO, which also happened to his successor, Feldman, who died. And now there is Randy Weingarten, the third president. And she too is presently on that board. And now there's Michael Mulgrave, who is the current president. And there were some sordid periods that I guess are no longer divisive. Things moved on, and the United Federation of Teachers no longer reviled for playing a part in the white backlash, if you will.
White backlash,
Black backlash.
White, black, okay.
And its progressive bona fides are well flourished today after a period of the problematic. Albert Shanker, of course, is an anti-communist Cold War liberal, and as I guess the Shackmanites, people more knowledgeable than myself could discuss this, but they ultimately were in that liberal orbit. It was a union that I believe probably actively discouraged communist members.
Discouraged. So Albert didn't like communists?
No. So you have certain.
He was anarchist.
Many sectarian fights that are now, thank God, in the dustbin of New York history.
Was he anarchist?
No. Actually, I believe he was on the track to get a doctorate in philosophy. And he had a kind of working man stereotypical voice, which was very good because he was a teacher, but he was a unionist. So I remember watching him on TV as a child, being sent to prison, and he sounded like a sanitation labor leader, more than he sounded like a professional pedagogue leader. And Shanker, a lot of hatred accrued to him in one period by radicals, but that is now the past, and we can look upon this tree here in a park devoted to labor history and say that his place is appropriately here too.
Yeah. I think I need a better,
You should come back in the daytime.
yeah, and also better phone, better camera coming in. It can do much better work. We can do this later on too.
Yeah. Anyway, that is Albert Shanker, and of course the right wing and the neoliberal economy.
What he like?
They attack the
He is
teachers'
right.
union. The teachers' union is now one of the last bastions, keeping at bay the attempt to deunionize America.
It's only 5% union ratio in this
Yeah.
country, and teachers' union is like the really glue of that 5%.
I don't know. I'm not a labor historian. But until the teachers had a union, they were they basically could look toward an old age of penury. They had no job due process. They had no job security, pensions that were ridiculous to speak of. It was a job for a maiden aunt, as they used to say. The unmarried sister would become the teacher in the family. And so the system could exploit these wayward ladies. And they place them with that other group that the system thinks nothing of, children. So you have the marginal children with the marginal women, and they're stuck in these classrooms.
Very sad.
But it was overturned by the militancy and the dedication of unions such as the United Federation of Teachers, and in the early years Albert Shanker. And now if you become a teacher, you're no longer working for a pittance. Even though Bloomberg and the charter school zealots are using the charter schools as a wedge to undo the job protections and pensions of teachers. And that is very lamentable. But let's see what happens in Wisconsin.
What's going on there?
You know, that's a major labor. The occupation of the Wisconsin State House preceded our occupation. It was one of the impetus. It was the impetus to what we did in many respects, and it was against the conservative Republican new governor seeking to undo collective bargaining, something one would have thought is well established. So with their charter schools, their efforts to undo collective bargaining, making the next generation of state workers look to a smaller pension than current workers. This is all advised to crunch the autonomy, integrity, and basic living standards of the worker in America. And they may succeed, but they may not succeed.
What do you think about the future? Do you think everybody is going to lose the job?
Well, you know, it's been projected that the system could continue even if the staggering figure of 75% of Americans become out of work. Well, that would be a really hierarchical system of a few haves and a majority of have-nots. And they believe that, as in some countries, it would be acceptable.
How is that possible? If 75% lose job, soon the rest 25% is gonna lose too. Who can stop that?
It's Alice in Wonderland. Like,
yeah.
I think you could have a polity and a sociology with a this out of work class. But keep in mind, we had slavery. You had millions of people without identity as a human as a full human being.
Did
That
they
was
have
acceptable here for hundreds of years.
Did they have any ID? The slaves, except
They were branded
branded, right? And
with
they
a hot
had
iron. They will no doubt use a similar brand on these 75 percenters out of work, and they'll be essentially like the people who were put in the Transport Act in the 18th century, sent off to Australia to be indentured servants, working for nothing.
Do you think Australia are working for nothing, but
Well, that's
not
in
to
the
freedom?
origin of, no, but
Like
that's what Australia was founded on.
it was a free
Indentured
country.
servants who were convicted under a Transport Act for various crimes, petty thievery perhaps in many cases, and here we had slavery, there they had indentured servants. But my point is that these unjust societies live a long time, and they may be planning a similar dispensation here, where you have 75% out of work, marginalized, but somehow the country could continue.
But this is darkness. This is corruption,
Well, it's morally corrupt.
and it's dark.
Well, it is the dark core of exploitation and the exploitational elements of capitalism.
Yeah.
You could have the same thing in the former Soviet Union, of a gulag, an archipelago of prisons all over the country.